There is a lot of times where clients are like, they look at a card and they're like, I don't know. The parents could have definitely been like, this is witchcraft. We're taking this away. But how are my clients going to see me? How are other therapists and other clinicians going to see me? Therapists once encouraged to ask, what does it feel like to not know? This card reminds me of my situation. I feel like I'm carrying a lot right now.
Welcome to another episode of All About Trauma. Today we are joined by Elizabeth Ritchie, a licensed clinical social worker and an EMDR-Certified psychological counselor from Virginia, USA. She utilizes a paths work approach and offers the use of tarot card imagery during her sessions as a tool. Currently, Elizabeth lives in Germany, where she provides these services to experts. She also conducts remote sessions, and you can reach out to her through her website, Ritchie LCSW.com, or her Instagram handle, Ritchie LCSW. Elizabeth, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you, Nicholas, as well, for joining us. How do you feel about our guest and our topic today?
Yeah, Liz, thank you very much for being here. I'm so appreciative of this opportunity. I sense that the foundation of tarot, the use of tarot cards in session is somewhat to engage the imagination or the function of imagination of the client that you're working with. And I guess with you, I would really love to explore the power and perhaps the threats in that. I personally don't think imagination is just a force of good. You know, the first thing that comes to mind when I think of the threat of imagination is Nazism, and also massacres across the world, right? That we see to this day. The power of people to dehumanize other humans and to imagine that other humans are things that are absolutely unreal. And of course, a lot of internal conflicts in couples, domestic violence is often driven by projective mechanisms, which is really this capacity for us to imagine a world and then project it like a projector onto a screen, right? Kind of blind us ourselves to reality. In saying this, I have a confession to make, because a foundational book of my work, when I started my career, I was reading sort of books that were important to me. And one of them is called Psychoanalysis, The Impossible Profession. It's quite a small book, but really quite powerful. And the word impossible already hints at the fact that we cannot reconcile two opposing forces, right? And essentially, I think these two forces, as perhaps a quote that I can read for you make it clear, are indeed the imaginative function and the function of reality. So I just opened the book at page 24, and there is this, there are two quotes I'm going to read. They're not very long. The first one is, his work with patients was leading him to new appreciations of the complexity of the task of psychoanalysis. In a paper called Wild Psychoanalysis, he derides his own long superseded idea that the patient suffers from a sort of ignorance, and that if one removes this ignorance by giving him information about the causal connection of his illness with his life, about his experiences in childhood, and so on, he's bound to recover. He goes on to mordantly observe that such measures have as much influence on the symptoms of nervous illnesses as a distribution of menu cards in a time of famine upon hunger, when there is hunger around, right? So giving information to patients and clients about their nervousness and their illness is as efficient as distributing menu cards when there is a famine among a population, right? So that says something about the power of information. Not a very good something. But a bit later, it says free treatment enormously increases some of, this is Freud actually. Freud tried to give free treatment. He tried a lot of things. He experimented a lot of things. So one of them was to give free treatment, no payment. And it says free treatment enormously increases some of a neurotic's resistances. The absence of the regulating effect offered by the payment of a fee to the doctor makes it itself very painfully felt. The whole relationship is removed from the real world, and the patient is deprived of a strong motive for endeavoring to bring the treatment to an end. In other words, if we don't treat certain things as real, then we fall into a kind of a a maze or a shadow that we cannot come out of very easily.
Yeah.
So that's my little relationship to reality and our capacity to sense reality and imaging things. So I want to extend now the word to you, of course, and just see where you go with this.
Sure. Thanks so much for that introduction and that kind of yeah, something to chew on a little bit there and the topic that we're going to be discussing today. I think for me, something that really drove me into the field of being a mental health professional was being able to see that our clients were not just their diagnosis, right? They weren't just their diagnoses, that there was a lot more going on underneath the surface. And so when I was working back in the States, I was working in a healthcare center where I was working with clients who were more so like vulnerable populations, low income. They were often on Medicaid or Medicare, which usually depicts that the client is low income, disabled, elderly. And working in a healthcare center, we were taking insurance. And so there was a lot of limitations about as far as what we could offer, because when we're working with our healthcare systems, there's things, that have to be approved by insurance companies. Something that I think has been really a breath of fresh air in working in private practice and working now here in Germany is being a lot more fluid and what I offer and being able to use things like tarot card imagery in sessions. And where I think imagination really comes into play here is that a lot of what trauma treatment is using visualization, is using, the imaginative part of our brain, which I think goes really against what our society really enforces is using our logical side of our brain or, our rational side of our brain. And it really limits kind of being able to use both parts. And so when we think about things like, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, a lot of what we're doing is using both parts of the brain, right? That's what the eye movement is about. That's what, we're kind of mimicking in awake time is the REM sleep, where our eyes are moving back and forth, they're processing information. And, certain techniques that we do with our clients is we have them start to visualize a safe place to go to when triggered, when they're feeling unsafe, right? Is there a safe place that you can imagine going to, right? And we're really asking our clients to lean into that. We're asking our clients to create a container where they can put disturbing thoughts, disturbing experiences into. Even techniques such as breathing techniques that we teach our clients, like think about a square as you breathe across, down, over, back up. And so a lot of healing, I think, requires us to use our imagination, our visualization. And where the tarot therapy comes in, and I think that has been so nice for me to be able to not think about the restrictions that maybe sometimes, are, what treatment is supposed to look like, what therapy is supposed to look like, is being able to use some new techniques and some things that maybe I wouldn't have felt as comfortable to use within the limits of insurance and the medical system. Um, and so tarot, I think, really allows clients to look at the images that are on a card and look at the symbolism, look at the archetypes that are there. And how does this relate to your story? Just like how our clients see in movies and media and film or read in a book and they can relate to a story. I think that's what clients can do in using the artwork that is in these cards. And that's where I think that we're allowing clients to engage with that imaginative piece again that I think is lost, somewhere along our development and in adulthood, especially that imagination, the creative process that all of us have is a little bit stunted and a little bit discouraged in our society.
Yes, absolutely. I'm thinking, as you say, that how certain toys can be real enablers of the imaginative function or inhibitors of the imaginative function, right? So even at the level of childhood, we start very early on in molding the imaginative function of a child in favor of, what should we call it, conformism or rules. And of course, the education system, both Einstein, for example, and Picasso denounced as being killers of the creative spirit. I think Picasso later in his life, is one of my greatest achievement was to survive the education system. So there are real forces. That's what you remind me, that there are real forces in the world that want our capacity to imagine to be contained somehow.
And I think, maybe early on in childhood, like you were talking about, there's all these toys and we're encouraged to be creative and play, right? And to play games and to think about, fantasies but I think at least speaking from being someone that grew up in the States is that our testing system is very much there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer, right? True or false or multiple choice. This is all that we've got, and there's certain, standards you have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much right or wrong. And I think that that's comfortable too, that for a lot of people, it's hard to be in the gray area, right? And it's so much, it feels better to have a yes or a no, a right or wrong. But I think at the same time, it very much limits our ability to think about the gray area. And then I think, again, at least speaking in the cultural sense from the States, is that there's very much this kind of stereotype of like the poor, starving artist, right? And that, if you go into the arts, music or, painting, whatever, that there's no money from it, right? You're going to fail. And so a lot of us kind of put those things to the side and we go into very like logic driven jobs, right? Whether that's being a lawyer, a doctor, finance.
Or technologies for that matter today, right? We live in a world of
Yeah,
technocrats and technicians, basically, right?
sure. And I think that while those things are all wonderful, that our whole focus kind of becomes that, and there's not a lot of other room for play or imagination or creativity. I think a lot of us kind of lose, and maybe as kids we grow up and our extracurricular activities might be music or dance. But then when we live in a system where it's very much like your job is your whole life, we don't have time or resources to really to lean into an artist. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I want to extend the question to our audience, because I'm sure the audience here will be split in either young adults, people who might become parents very soon, or people who are already parents. And so all of us in this group have had to take decisions as to how much of a child's imagination we want to nourish or not. Are you the parent who, is afraid of letting your child pursue an artistic career? Or are you very much a parent who has gone through that experience and now want to be the opposite? You really want to give your children expression and freedom in that field. If you're a young adult, what kind of an experience of family are you coming out? To what extent are you repressing or nourishing that creative aspect of yourself?
I'm imagining for someone who has been through the system, maybe education system, who knows that there's a right and wrong answer, when they see the cards and you're telling them, what does this symbolize possibly for you? And they're thinking, will I get the right answer? What was your experience for people who are the first session? Were they asking, Liz, did I get it right? Is that what the picture means? Or
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think even introducing it in my sessions, and this is something that's fairly new for me. That's I think I had to also recognize my own fear about bringing this into my work. Again, I come from a background where it's very much, evidence based is the right way to what kind of therapies you're using, what kind of treatment modalities you're using. Is it evidence-based? And so coming from a background of, being EMDR certified, using a parts work approach, mindfulness, all these things that, the books and the system has said, like, okay, this is what is okay to use. I had a lot of fear about starting to incorporate this into my own approach. How are my clients going to see me? How are other therapists and other clinicians going to see me? I had to really kind of work through that. And what was so helpful, where you and I met, Nicholas, at the conference earlier this year, is, bringing this to a group of other clinicians and then being like, "This is really this is great. I love this. I'm so interested in this." And it was really reassuring for me that, like, okay, this is something that, can be really useful. And I've also found a lot of comfort in, like, researching how to use this in my sessions, that I'm not the first, right? There are other clinicians using tarot card imagery or other, like, oracle cards in their sessions. I'm not the first. And that, I think there's a strong kind of focus on evidence base, but, something that I really value in my sessions with my clients is my relationship with them, right? And the research shows that, like, that's the most important thing for healing, is the relationship that we build with our clients. It's not if you're doing CBT, DBT, those things are great, but the relationship that we have with our clients is the most important and the most healing thing. That's like the number one indicator of success with our
Rapport.
clients. Yeah, rapport, exactly. And so starting to bring this into my sessions, one thing that I've done is I've put it in my informed consent. Like, the paperwork that I send over to the clients, it says, here are the things that I offer. If you're interested in this, we can talk about this. And for some clients, this may be a piece of their spirituality. So to answer your question about how a client may respond to it, I think a lot of clients are kind of weary because this is foreign, this is new. And if we're able to kind of get past that discomfort, or that, like, okay, let's get curious. Let's try it. I think there is a lot of times where clients are like, they look at a card and they're like, I don't know. I don't see, right? And recognizing that this might be a defense, right? Of this, am I getting it right or wrong? Like you said, Renee, like, I don't wanna say something wrong, you know?
Or right and wrong is the safe space, and I'm not sure I want to leave this safe space, because we have normalized this sense that we know as humans. We have normalized the notion that we are the knowers of the world, right? Rather than a question mark, or an open question about who we are in the world, what is life, and all of that. That's scary for the evidence-based societies that we have become, right?
And I think another piece to this is the people-pleasing part of a lot of our clients, right? This, what does she want to hear? What does Liz, what does, my counselor want to hear, right?
Yes.
And so I really try to encourage my clients, and all during a lot of parts of our sessions, not even just tarot card, but there is no right or wrong, right? There's no right or wrong to what you're experiencing right now. And I think that goes back to a little bit of the passage that you read about, like, whatever you're experiencing right now is very real, right? There isn't I think sometimes clients think about, like, maybe I'm just making something up from the cards. Maybe it's not even real. And, like, whatever is coming up for you, like, naturally and organically, is very real. A therapist once encouraged to ask, what does it feel like to not know? Right? Like, really just going with that and starting there. Like, what does that feel like to not know right now?
Which addresses existential philosophy and existential therapy, the recognition that we die, that we are mortals. That's the greatest unknown, yeah, to transcend into an afterlife or an after body when the body dies, right? That's the greatest question that we have. And sometimes letting ourselves open to the I don't know, I think, does take us very close to that profound, ever existing existential dread, if you like. As you were speaking, I was thinking, when you're presenting a client with there is no right and wrong, the next question might be, okay, but what are the implications of me now allowing myself to give you a spontaneous answer? Like if I allow myself to do this now, what does that imply about me and the future and who I should become? Do you ever sense something along those lines?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's interesting. But I think there's oftentimes what I notice is some resistance and some anger, right? Of like, letting that guard down and letting more of the kind of, let's just go with it, right? And because I think, oftentimes what I imagine is kind of this not being composed, right? Or not being poised in a certain way, or my answer is gonna sound silly, or my answer is gonna sound stupid, right? I think
This
there's
is
a
what I'm referring to with what does it imply? Like if I allow myself now to be spontaneous, does it mean I'm a stupid person as opposed to an intelligent person?
Right.
For example, but also all the things that you just said, does it mean that now I'm not a serious person as my family knows me? Or does it mean that I'm not in control anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. What does this mean about me? And I think that goes into parts work, which is very essential to the work that I do. I'm currently in the process of internal family systems level 1 training, and using parts work in the last few years with my clients has been a real game changer. Really, I think it's the biggest thing that I've noticed is how it reduces a lot of shame for clients. Again, kind of going back to what you're talking about, like the diagnoses and, this information about what a client might be experiencing and what that means. For someone that's, oh, I feel so stupid, or I feel so anxious, or like there's just this anxious part about me. Really being able to use that language of like, that is a part of you, right? That's not all of you. And being able to work with those parts, right? Can you notice right now that there's a part of you that's really afraid of like just saying what you see in the cards? Can you notice that part of you that's really, worried about, leaning into that, nurturing that part of, just this creative process? What's that feel like, Where do you notice that? And I think this kind of recognition from our clients and for ourselves that we are not a mono mind. There is so many different parts of us, and sometimes those parts show up at different times. And like you were talking about, like, what does that mean for my family and what they think about me? Like these masks that we kind of put on in order to belong in certain circles.
Mhm.
And even like a mask that maybe I'm wearing to see my therapist, to see my counselor, right? Because it's very vulnerable, right? And I think where I've been able to utilize the cards and parts work is for a lot of clients who struggle with imagination and visualization, and they can't kind of go in and like see somebody and what does this child look like. We'll pull out the cards, and they'll be able to pull a card for, oh, this is what my protector part looks like, right? This is what my inner child looks like. This is what that part that's really mean to me and calls me names looks like. And being able to interact with the cards if they're not really able to go in and really see that kind of image. So it's a helpful tool in that way.
Liz, when you mentioned the path connection to this approach, would you say that this kind of work also helps the individual own their own story as and maybe look into themselves and understand their experiences and understand maybe the kind of dynamics that are happening within them as compared to dissociating, because as you mentioned, the connection is very important. So would you notice that it helps with the connection with oneself, even as someone who's undertaking this kind of approach?
Yeah, good question. I think any kind of awareness is super healing, right? And so I think the cards for me is meaning making, right? How can we make sense out of our lives right now? And I think that's really the power of storytelling in any sense. When we use metaphors, I think that's something else the cards do. It's metaphor, it's a metaphorical tool. And so much of how we make sense out of our story, our experiences, what has happened to us. Sometimes it's just so helpful to see it outside of us, right? This card reminds me of my situation. I feel like I'm carrying a lot right now, or I feel like I've been carrying so much for so long, and that I can really relate to that, this metaphor sense. And we speak a lot in metaphors, right? I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. That's a metaphor where that imagery, I can actually see what that, looks like. And, oh, yeah, that's how I feel with this person in my life, or that's how I felt with my parents growing up. I felt like I had to walk on eggshells, or, um, I feel just like I've been run down, right? We can see what that looks like. And so I think that's what the cards can really make a space for, is this like metaphor and this connection to my experiences, what that has looked like for me, and it not just be all inside me. And I don't even know how to make sense of everything that's gone on for me or what I'm going through right now. But if I can see it in front of me and connect to that, then it brings us awareness to like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So I think that's a little bit of what the cards can do, and just any kind of area where we're able to tell our story and connect to, what that looks like. A lot of us maybe were nonverbal when trauma came up in our lives, right? We didn't have the words for it, or we weren't at the age where we were able to verbalize what has happened to us. And so I think for many of our clients, many of us, we didn't even have the words to describe what happened. But the images, the stories that we see or that we read, help to give us the language about what has happened to us, and helps us to identify there's this part of me that feels like that. There's a part of me that really relates to this story, to this card, to this artwork.
Liz, what are some of the most sort of the most elucidating client stories that come up for you to show how that imaginative work can free and heal?
With using just any of the approaches that I offer.
There is a desire in me for us to zoom out a little bit, because I observed earlier on in the interview when you said, I have this in the informed consent as an option for clients to consider. And when you were saying that, as of course, I don't remember exactly your words, but you put your hand on your heart, and as to show how dear that is to you. It's like, that is a very dear part of me, but you can make use of it or not. And so I kind of with that, you have really gone on a journey to be able to put your hand on your heart and speak those words, right? And recognize how dear this subject is to you. Intuitively makes me think that probably there was some repression of that function on the past. As you said, I come from a family that was very evidence-based. Without us entering into the details of your family life, what was that journey for you from being a child to being a person who could hardly connect to this part of you, and now being someone who can be on camera and share that love with everybody?
Yeah, to answer the first part of the question, I'm very fortunate to have um to grown up with parents who are very open-minded and non-judgmental as far as when it comes to spiritual practices. Ironically enough, I grew up as a pastor's daughter, in a very Christian household, but something that was really important to me about growing up in the church was the mission work that was done. And so at a very young age, I was exposed to these programs that were within the church that helped vulnerable communities. Did things like feeding the homeless. We provided shelter for people who were unhoused and seeking work. We, as an adolescent, I took part in programs where we volunteered with people with special needs and disabilities, rebuilding houses for people in impoverished areas. And that was the most meaningful work for me, was giving back to these communities and this helping. That's what took me into deciding to pursue social work as my major. And social work in the States, at least, is a very broad term. But at the core of it is helping individuals to meet their needs and helping families and communities and really valuing human dignity. That's really what got me into the social work field. And where tarot came in was, again, just thankful that even though my parents, growing up in a Christian household, that I was like 12 and my cousin gifted me a deck of tarot cards. And my parents, I grew up in Virginia, which is, there's kind of what, I don't know if you guys have heard the term like Bible Belt, but there is a lot of, strong Christian communities there, Southern Baptists and all of that. And so my parents could have definitely been like, this is witchcraft, we're taking this away. But they weren't. And they were very open minded and non judgmental. And so I'm very thankful for them. And, at 12, it was something that I was just kind of like playing around with. But as I got older, I started using it in a more of a spiritual way, that when I was going through transitions in my life, whether it was, going through heartbreak and heartache, or going to college, moving to Germany, that I turned to the cards, and looking at, I don't have all the information, I don't have all the answers. Can I use this tool and get some more information? And I found it to be really comforting and reassuring. And getting into my career, I started just thinking about, how can I combine these two? And that's when, I think early on in my career, I was like, this is, going to be frowned upon. But moving to Germany and starting my private practice, I was like, I can do what I want. And so, just kind of like, hey, here's a chance for me. This has always been something that I have been interested in. How can I combine the two? And thankfully, there's other people who have paved the way a little bit before me and been a good resource to me.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So that gift brought such a big smile on your face. It was a beautiful, nice gift. And the tarot cards, the first deck that you got. Yeah.
Yeah, I still have it. Yeah.
Was there any client who also had these kind of inhibitions? Because that's also an impression that is here, that whether it's tarot cards, whether it's any kind of these materials that seek
Yeah.
be quote unquote magic, or
Yeah.
some resistance for people who are in Muslim faith, people who are in Christian faith. So when you meet different persons who you feel might need this approach and they are of this faith, is there a certain approach you get to introduce?
Unfortunately, so many individuals go through religious trauma. There's so much good, that can be done within the communities in a faith-based place. There's a lot of harm that can be done, especially when it comes to, shame and guilt and going back to imagination, right and wrong, right? There's a lot of within religion, that there's a right way and there's a wrong way.
Yeah.
So during the intake forms, I'll ask clients, what did you grow up in a religious background? And that's a good way to just get to understand, like, what did you grow up believing or practicing? And do you still practice that? And so that's something that, again, just gauging what are, the practices of our clients and any kind of spiritual based. And, one way to just lightly ask it again is, when you're going through a really hard time, who do you turn to? And some people might say someone physical, right? Their mom, dad, their parents, their partner. And some people might say something like God or nature. And so that's one way to kind of gauge and honor and respect what a client's practices are. And for times where I've kind of not had to, but that I've offered, like, hey, how do you feel about, using imagery or symbolism in our sessions. One way that I offer that is using tarot cards, and not in a fortune telling sense, but just looking at the imagery of the cards. And there's definitely been a client or two. It's like, no. And, we roll with that. It's okay. Yeah, no problem. It's here if you want to revisit it. But yeah, just wanted to I was curious. And there's some clients who are like, yeah, I guess we could try that. Okay. I'm open to that. I mean, I have my own deck, but yeah, I've never thought about using it in a therapeutic sense. So yeah, those are some experiences regarding how to approach it and how to gauge where a client is at with it.
If you go a little deeper in this direction, what do you think you're instigating in that client who says, well, I've always had the deck here in the house, but I've never really thought of using it in a therapeutic sense. What do you understand of that?
I think the first thing that comes up for me is maybe just a little bit of what people's assumptions are regarding what therapy or what counseling is supposed to look like versus kind of this what it looks like, what it doesn't. Again, kind of going back to this right or wrong or this is how it looks. This doesn't go with therapy. That's not something I've ever heard before. So I think that that's kind of my first thought is what people perceive to be therapy.
And what do you gather
Yeah.
people perceive to be therapy?
I think a lot of people kind of pigeonhole it to just be talking. And I think I'm so grateful for, I guess, like the last 10, 15 years where I think that, we're hearing about things like art therapy and you mentioned play therapy and sand tray therapy, and that there are not one size fits all. There are so many different avenues to healing. I think even in the last 10, 15 years, it's more common for clients and therapists to go for a walk, get out of the office, right? We don't have to just sit here for an hour, right? Can we walk and talk and do therapy? Can we, use artwork and color or, play games in our session? And I'm really thankful for we're opening up and not pigeonholing therapy to just be talk, right? That we are looking at all these new avenues of what healing really is.
Officially, there are about 400 officially recognized therapeutic modalities. When I mean officially recognized by academia, meaning there is some research behind
Right.
some of these branches of therapy. If you ask me now to name some, I would probably only name, 5 or 6. So I myself, even being a professional, don't really have access to all of the branches. So of course, clients are going to come with a very, very narrow view of what therapy is. I want to go even a little further. I want to ask you, what do you think is really the assumption about what healing is?
Unfortunately, I think sometimes I get concerned that a lot of our clients think that healing means not feeling pain anymore, not experiencing depression, anxiety, rejection, feelings of, stress and uncertainty. I really try to, if I start to notice like maybe clients saying like, "Oh, I'm still feeling this way," or "I felt this way and I thought I was all better," that it is human, right, to experience pain, heartache, anxiety, depression, that maybe we need to kind of redefine what healing is going to look like for this person, right? What's going to be different? Even though you're still going to experience these uncomfortable feelings and situations, what's going to be different about you the next time you experience these things?
So this image of wanting to fix a broken machine is kind of what you find stereotypically consuming the mindset of what healing is. Almost cliche. There's so many Instagram videos talking about the fixing mindset, and how to get out of it and so on. But actually, I have to say, it actually comes up quite often in a very natural way. In clients saying, I want to fix this. Like I don't know how to love. I want to fix this. It's like in contradiction in terms, because I mean, love is really rooted at a great extent in the ability, in our ability to imagine what the other person is going through.
Yeah.
You can't rationalize love. You can't fix love. You cannot square it. If we had been able to square love, we would all be in love. Obviously, that's not the case, right? This reminds me of a recent client who told me, she wanted to fix something about herself. And I said, don't worry, death will fix you well enough. So you want to die right now? No? Okay, let's not fix you then. If something is fixed, there is no movement. And if there is no movement, there is no exchange of energy between one point and another. When there is no movement, there is no life. So even beyond the idea of development, so you want to be a wave, you don't want to be a rock, so to say. Again, we can probably argue that a rock has some form of life, right? If you look at the atomic level, a lot of things are moving. But I think everybody is getting the idea of where I'm going, right? You need to have life, you need to have movement to be alive. So then, if we connect to the idea that life is movement, that to be alive is being in movement, and perhaps maybe we can address illness as places within ourselves where there is not enough movement, where actually something is fixed. A client of mine said yesterday, I'm pathetic. I'm a pathetic man. And I just did stupid decisions in my life. I said, okay, interesting. You're a pathetic man. What do you actually mean by that? I didn't take that word as meaning something other than a movement of his psyche, right? But he's taking it in the form of, I'm pathetic. I know who I am. I am this, pathetic. Pathetic doesn't move anymore in his own consciousness, his own psyche, right? So this client is not using his imagination anymore because he knows the answer. He's pathetic.
In parts work, there's a belief that every behavior has a function. And so if this part of me, if this voice tells me I'm pathetic, then I'll have to, try to prove that I'm not, or I'll have to work extra hard. If it stops telling me I was pathetic, then maybe I would get complacent, or I wouldn't work hard enough. I want to continue doing things to prove myself that, I'm not pathetic, right? And so I think that's where I would lean into first is, where is this voice coming from? Does it sound familiar?
Mm-hmm. And then I see how the opportunity to use tarot cards could come in there, because at some point you left to go into imagining what this part looks like, right? Like give it character and give it form. I'm wondering what the audience is resonating with. I want to ask everybody, how does it look like to be pathetic? Like, can you find the pathetic part inside yourself right now? What would it look like? What would it feel like?
Especially when it comes to early childhood trauma or early traumatic experiences in our life, that sometimes we don't have the words and sometimes we don't have the language. So if a client is really struggling to even talk about their experience or talk about what's going on, sometimes we can just pull a card and that will really prompt, what's going on below the surface. And maybe up here, I'm not able to talk about it, but once I see this image, maybe I start to notice some things and it kind of resonates with my experience. So I think that might be a good activity or demonstration that we can do where we can practice a little bit.
Sure. Okay. Renee, are you excited? Open?
Yeah, I'm all for it.
Great.
Okay. So one thing that I think is important for our clients is having choices. And so I'll ask what deck maybe calls your attention a little bit more. There's different artwork, and I think that's really what's cool too, is that not every deck is going to be the same. And so again, when we're talking about using tarot in a session and not for like a fortune telling kind of manner, but really using the imagery, we're allowing our clients to go in and say, a lot of these cards might have kind of these textbook, oh, this is what the card means, but we're really letting go of that, right? That whatever you see on the cards is what it means for you. This is a very individual and personal experience. what the book says about the cards. It's what the symbolism means for you. And
Because of course there is a whole world of descriptions of these cards.
yeah, so maybe like I said, it's good to have choices about the cards, and there's different kinds of artwork. So this is called the Star Seeker deck. And it's a little more like newer or like modern as far as I think it has more representation of different kinds of families, people. And this is my older deck that is my first deck when I was like 12. And I would say it's more close to the classic Rider-Waite. Yeah, is there one that more so calls your interest? The Star Seeker or the
I like the Star Seeker. I like the even just the name Star Seeker.
uh-huh. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna shuffle, and whenever like you just have a inclination of stop, what I'll do is I'll pull a card from the top for you. And that will just kind of start a conversation for us.
Consult.
Right. So
Mm.
we have, and maybe a little closer for you, Three of Pentacles. And I want you to just take a moment and I want you to describe the card, what you see.
I see three hands, and the immediate impression I get is sharing, community, family.
Mm.
So I feel these are three individuals who are probably in a family, and they're sharing to each other. They're sharing a moment. They're sharing what they have. Immediately locks into what I usually do every week, Sunday. We come together and we share. We share meals. We share our stories. So that's how I feel from seeing these three hands open to each other.
And what are some of the emotions that you think this card invokes?
Home.
Mm.
Or welcome. There's a Kiswahili word that says karibu. Welcoming the guest.
Mm.
Openness, the open palm with something.
Yeah.
So that's how it feels. It feels like home.
Yeah. And if this card had a message for you, what do you think it would be?
The message is, I'm just as good as what I share within my tribe, my community. I'm just as good as what I'm able to give. Keeping it to myself means nothing. It can't be any valuable if I withhold it. It's not
Mhm.
valuable when I give it.
Mhm. Wonderful. Great. So, yeah, that's a little taste of what a card can really bring up, and I love the all the connections that you made to your work that you do, also with your family.
Mm.
Yeah, that's great.
His values,
Absolutely, values.
the value of sharing. There is a profound statement about who Rene thinks to be and how and what he identifies with. I am not if I don't share. I am because I share.
Yeah.
So you revealed something quite deep there psychologically about yourself just by free associating with that one card. I don't want to do it, and I don't want to reveal anything about myself. No, I'm not. Okay, no worries. Let's do it.
Yeah. Did you wanna, yeah, I love, the points that you brought up, Nicholas, about values, and, I think if, again, Renee were my client, that's something that would be really, useful for our sessions, these values about sharing, home, community, like, just from that discussion, I would know so much about Renee and what's important to him and his system. Yeah. Okay, Nicholas. Is there a deck that calls your name more so?
I didn't get a full picture. Okay, yeah, that's better. I mean, I do like it that it's small and yeah, it gives me that sense of simplicity that is gonna be a
Yeah.
little bit simpler. So I don't mind that we use this one.
Sure. Yeah. So, same kind of, scenario. Yeah, and tell me when to stop when you're ready.
I cannot see you shuffling. Maybe you.
Is this better?
I'm just gonna try to feel a stop
Sure.
as you're shuffling, right? Okay. Yeah, you could stop. You could stop.
Okay. Okay, then we have the Five of Swords. Don't know how. I know your view is different.
Yeah, so I see a man dressed with a blue tunic and some purple boots, and what seems to be a kind of a rope tied around his chest all the way to the abdominal area. And he has two swords on the right hand, which he elevates towards the sky, and one sword in his left hand, which he kind of elevates but more at a right angle. And then there are two people. The background is it's on a beach. It looks like it's on a beach. There's the sea, there are clouds and the birds. And then there are two swords crossing, just like the swords that he's holding in his hand, right hand, but they are on the floor, on the sand, so to say. Yeah, so a lot of swords, a
Yeah.
lot of crossings. That what jumps out to me.
Yeah.
Something,
What symbol?
yeah, something conflicting, something not quite fluid and clear. A conflict of some some manner. I mean, the position suggests to me power, but also there is this constraint that I feel around the chest, like the rope is constraining me. If it were me, I would feel it like it's constraining me. And it's both a position of power that I see, like a declaration of someone declaring something, but also making a point that there is a problem. Like the swords on the floor for me is like there is a problem here, and I'm not sure what the message is, but
What symbols are familiar to you, if any? Whether it's the belt that you mentioned, constraining, the swords. Are there symbols here that feel familiar to you?
hmm. If I think of just one sword, then the image that comes to mind is Braveheart, William Wallace. I so much love that film. I used to. That image, I saw it in the cinema, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. It remains so impressed in me. So this real kind of symbol of love for me. It's like this, the woman of this man had been basically abused and taken away from him and killed. Um, and he kind of holds that sword as a symbol. I am going to hold up my love for this woman, I guess, until I have my revenge in his case, but until I find justice. I guess that was his message. That's what I'm thinking of. The sword is a powerful symbol in that way, fighting for a right cause, sort of thing. Although, of course, intellectually I could say I don't believe that, but yeah, emotionally
Yeah.
there are.
Yeah. The themes that you mentioned that you see in this card, whether it's conflict, constraints, love, justice. Yeah, how does this relate to your situation or something that maybe is going on for you in your life? Does that connect with you?
Mm, yeah, I mean, certainly there are certain internal conflicts that I'm dealing with. You know what surprised me of this card, though, is how casual and relaxed the two people at the back are. It's like this man is sort of putting up this grand sort of speech or action, and then the two people in the back are not interested. They're just doing their own thing. So that kind of makes me wonder if what this guy is doing is true or has any value in a sense.
Hmm. What does that bring up for you as far as this kind of questioning of this action or this behavior and it being valuable or it being worthy, maybe?
There is this desire in me at the moment to go back to Japan.
Mm.
I lived in Japan for 7 years, and it's both a place of profound transformation, like real psychological transformation, because for the first time, I I understood that the language of Japan, the Japanese language, is a language that centers around the heart, not the mind, not the idea.
Wow.
Yeah, that was an insight that totally changed the way that I live. You don't say things because you're smart or because they're going to be sounding smart or look smart, or because they're going to advance an idea within the dialogue we're having. You say things because they produce a certain emotional resonance with the other people. And that resonance is always harmony that
Mm.
they're looking. But anyway, so profound insight, but also the first time that I married and experienced divorce, which was very, uh, s- yeah, very strong. And then I had other losses. I built a farm over there, and there's this kind of very original educational farm. Like it was a farm, but I was building an education system on top of it. And so, for example, studying chemistry by observing what's happening with plants and with the soil and with water and so on, or thinking about history by understanding where that farm is sitting, the context in which it is sitting, right? What is the history of this place and so on. So a lot of things happen, both for the good and for the bad. And now I've been away from Japan for 11 years
Oh,
and I still can speak Japanese somehow. And I'm starting to have some Japanese clients. And so things are awakening in me again, and this desire to go back to Japan and go back to school and learn Japanese again. But I'm so conflicted about it.
yeah. Yeah. What would it be like to release any of those constraints that maybe are that
Yeah,
have
it's interesting in this question because the constraint, if that rope is anything, that rope is me. Like if
mm,
there is anything, like that rope symbolizes me somehow.
wow.
I am constraining myself.
Mhm.
I don't really see myself in the blue man, although perhaps I can see a part of myself, perhaps saying, this is what I experience, these are the conflicts that I experience. This is the swords or the hurts or the love that I experience, right?
Yeah.
But I'm like tightening up this man and saying, no, 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 just don't, no, shut up, kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of ignoring it or suppressing it.
Yeah, and just tightening it. It's like, okay, I'm gonna let you do, like, you can do your thing, but I'm not letting him do it
Mhm.
freely, basically.
Yeah.
And so now the two people at the back being disinterested kind of makes sense to me because it's like part of me doesn't want to look at this. Part of me is not looking at it with interest. Is not providing compassion. It's not, it's just putting it to the side sort of thing. Like nothing is happening, right? For those two people at the back, in my imagination, nothing is happening. And
Mm.
yeah, a part
Yeah.
of me says, yeah, okay, whatever, nothing is happening. Yeah.
Yeah. What would it be like to turn around and to look at that? What about those 2 people if they turned around and looked at it? What would that be? What would that feel like?
I guess I would like these two people to come to the front and to have eye contact with this man before they decide whether this is important or not.
Mhm.
And I imagine that if those two people will come to the front, that rope will fall.
Yeah. To witness some of that constraint or that holding back to just see it.
Yeah, the rope will fall and we will see the man in its full clothes, like in more, because if the arrow falls, like the clothes are gonna move more with his body, like they're going to represent the emotions better, I guess.
Mm.
Like with the rope so tight, we can't really understand his inner movements. I mean, yeah, that's just in my imagination, I guess. It makes only sense to me.
Yeah. If there was one message that you were to take away from this card that it may have for you, what would it be regarding constraints or letting that part have movement to be seen?
I would say I recognize the difficulty of those two people and coming to the front. It's a little confronting. It's like this is a it's uncomfortable to re-witness, re-see, re-watch, re-acknowledge. Yeah, so I can actually empathize with the people at the back
Mm.
a bit more than right at the beginning when I started to describe them. At the same time, I think it's inevitable that they will need to come to the front and acknowledge this man because um, I don't think this man was always so big. I don't think he held so many swords. And I think their indifference has made it bigger, and what comes next we don't know, but it's just gonna get bigger and bigger. Like the conflict is there are going to be more and more swords, and that's maybe not useful. So even though it's uncomfortable, that would be the message. Even though it's uncomfortable, you better come and look at him. Basically, that would be the message.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for participating in that. And something that, I might just ask my clients yeah, is to reflect on that card. I might ask that, I might send a picture of this to them or, the card that you pulled, Renee. And some clients might, save it as their background on their phone or, print it off and put it on their fridge or something and just kind of think about that message for the week and to be reminded about how important that, my community is or how important, letting all parts of me witness how difficult this inner conflict is and this big decision, right? And just having empathy for, yeah, I know this is really hard for us right now. This is a really difficult decision to make. This means a lot to me, right? Can we?
You make me cry now. Shut up.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and really honoring that, yeah, this is really hard. Can we, those parts that are, maybe finding it difficult to look at this, can we, what would it be like for them to turn around and to look and to acknowledge how this is really weighing on us, right? Can we just show some compassion? So, yeah.
Wow,
That
that was so easy. Not from this side of things, but it looked like from a methodological point of view, like I mean, we got so much out of so little, and we have 5 minutes together, 10 minutes. So wow, and that's really impressive. I think I have to change my career.
I think what I love about, both IFS parts work and using tarot card imagery is it really trusting that my client has the answers, right? It's not my job to tell them what to do, how to think, what to it's I can guide and navigate and help to facilitate that. But again, what I love about the theory behind parts work, IFS, and using the tarot cards is really believing that, you know, our client has the answers, our client has the ability to heal. And I think that's a big part about a big theory behind IFS is that we are like made to heal. Like we have everything that we need inside of us in order to heal from, our pain, our trauma. And sometimes, just our job as the clinician or mental health therapist is to just help to navigate that. But it's not up to me to come up with the answers or
It's up to you to trust the inner healer
yeah.
in the other person.
Yeah, that self-trust, that self-leadership, those 2 big components of the parts work of IFS. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's my experience is wow. The moment you pulled out that card, I was like, wow, this could be my favorite card in the deck. You don't know which card could even be better than this one. And
Yeah.
and, and my impression is, and I don't know if you might have a similar experience, is when you talked about people who have different religious beliefs, when I talk about the card and how the message it gives to me, do you feel there's a similarity to possibly people who see scriptures, the Quran, the Bible, and they see a verse and they get to relate to the verse, and like you said, they can take a picture of the verse, put it on their wallpaper, anything. Do you feel that's a similar process that people get to derive meaning from whatever they read, whatever they see?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, again, going back to meaning making, how does this verse, this scripture, this picture, how does it help me to make meaning of what I'm experiencing internally, externally? How does it touch me? And I think that's really the key of, of this is how does this exterior thing, a verse, scripture, this picture, this artwork, how does it where does it touch me, right? Yeah, I love that.
One last question before we go, Liz. Um, With regards to social media and social media consumption, where do you stand in terms of what this is doing, even pornography for that matter, what this is doing to our imagination, our capacity to relate imaginatively to ourselves?
Yeah. Oof. Big, big topic, right?
Me-
Um, yeah, especially with AI and chat GPT. I think my biggest concern is that again, the use of AI can be really helpful in a lot of ways. But maybe it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about with extremes, right? If we use ChatGPT, AI to, hey, what should I do today? We're really letting go of like this all, letting go of being creative of what I want to do with my day. I'm seeing a lot of people use it almost like a therapist. We're gonna sacrifice the connection with another human being, that human connection, and I really worry about maybe that self-leadership that we were talking about, that self-trust, in this AI, this ChatGPT, whatever, to come up with a response of what I should say to my boss, my colleagues, my friends, my girlfriend, whatever, and not trusting myself to really be able to show up and to be able to express myself, respond, communicate my needs. I'm not trusting myself. I don't feel like it's right. It goes back to everything we've been talking about. This I rely on this machine or this, social media in order to, navigate how I live. There's a right or wrong way. My Instagram, my social media feed is telling me I should be thinking this way. I should be working out this way. I should be eating this way. ChatGPT says I should, say this in my email back to my boss. And I'm really not trusting myself and my creativity, my imagination, my ideas, because I'm so worried about getting it right or wrong. So that's my fear about using, what the future is with AI, with where social media is going these days. Again, there's great uses of it, and ways that we can connect and ways that we can share information. But I think there's a lot of harm that, there's a potential for.
Yeah. I want to reinforce what you just said because as you were speaking, I saw what we did with these cards. First you asked us to abandon knowledge of cards, right? Stereotypical assumptions and ideas. And if we do that, that gets us closer to our present reality, the body, the senses. And then you show me a card and you're asking me to respond in that moment spontaneously. So I'm just using again my intelligence, everything that I can do in my brain, I'm doing it now in that moment, right? And then I'm sensing, I was feeling, I was sensing in this present moment myself. And with that, I was creatively expressing. I had to find the words, right? Like you could see my hesitation sometimes. And so this is probably what we have been talking about all along in this interview, Liz, is that we have been calling people to come and imagine with us, starting from them, starting from here, starting from this present moment, from this body,
Mhm.
rather than out there, influences, ideas, and so on. And that's sort of my take of what we've been doing here. So I thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you very much. It's been amazing. I really enjoyed, very relaxing. You brought out certain things of me I didn't think I was going to bring out, which is beautiful. Renee?
Yeah, I would say that anyone who hasn't experienced tarot cards, definitely should be open to it. It really works on your imagination. It's very easy. You just have to look within yourself, and that was an easier process for me. And yeah, you can underestimate how much you can find yourself when you just look at a small picture. It's not just small picture, very few things there. It can really relate with you a lot. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah. Thank you both for your vulnerability, allowing yourself to interact with the cards and participating with that. And thank you all so much for having me. This was great. I really loved the conversation. So I'm so glad we got to connect.
Okay, wonderful. Until next time, everybody, keep imagining and keep connecting with your present realities, and we'll see you soon.